Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our January 27th, 2025, 3 p.m. land use hearing. As our tradition suggests, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you again for being here. My name is Kristen Stevens. I'm currently the chair of the Board of County Commissioners. I'm joined by my colleagues, Commissioner Jody Sheddick McNally from District 3 and Commissioner John Kafalas from District 1. Behind us, we have from the Clerk and Recorder's Office, we have Lindsay Jones, and she will be taking notes and recording this meeting because it's a public meeting. Across the way from the County Attorney's Office, we have Frank Haug, and then a variety of folks from our county departments. And I'm going to turn it over to the Planning Manager, Jenny Oxmacher, for introductions and to share some of our hearing procedures. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We respectfully request that all members of the audience silence their electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda and hearing procedures, which are located on the wall just to the right of the hearing room entrance, right there. And for those of you joining us online, you can find that at larimer.org/BOCC/commissioners-meetings. Please wait and to speak until recognized by the chair. Please maintain civility, refraining from audience applause, comments, or disruptions, whether positive or negative, during the meeting. Please make all comments to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium. We do have a portable microphone available as needed. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. Please speak directly into the microphone so that those joining us remotely may hear. Upon request, we do have assisted listening devices available for the hearing impaired. For those of you on Zoom, you will be muted until you're recognized by the chair. If an online attendee wishes to speak or requests that a consent item be removed, please use the raise your hand function on the Zoom control bar or *9. As mentioned, I'm Jenny Axmaker, the Planning Manager. I'm joined here at the dais by Justin Curry, one of our county planners, Casti Fior, a principal planner. We have Ryan Oswaldell, our support CERT staff. Across the way, we have Connor Sheldon and Tracy Shambo joining us from our engineering group. We have County Planner Jared C., and then we have a couple members from our Building Inspection Division joining us as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So now we'll go over some additional information, including what is on today's agenda. So we have a tabled item, which will be heard on February 10th instead of today, February 10th, 2025. And that item is the Cerro Resort Cabins ASR and Appeal, file number 23, Zone 3442. Then for today's consent agenda, we have two items. We have the Andreasen Accessory Living Appeal, 24 Zone 3607, and this is an appeal to the maximum accessory living area size to allow for a 1,407 square foot detached accessory living area above an existing structure where 1,200 square foot would otherwise be allowed. And that location is 4482 Howling Pines Way in Loveland, Colorado. And then we have the Vindicate Appeals, file number 24, Zone 3703. This is an appeal to our codes for several items, 4.3.4.2, drainage of 4.5.5A, pedestrian and bicycle circulation, and an appeal to the code 4.6.7E, design, use, and location of vehicle parking for multi-unit residential and non-residential development. And that is to facilitate the development of the site with a no-cost nonprofit market in an existing structure. So those are all the items on the consent agenda. And then we have one public hearing discussion item after those items, and that's the Askland Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Appeal, file number 24, Zone 3601, and that's an appeal to the section of the county's land use code to deviate from the requirement of installation of electric vehicle parking spaces and charging station infrastructure. So folks understand what the consent agenda is. The items on the consent agenda are considered routine in nature, and as far as we know, there's no perceived or significant controversy. Items on the consent agenda will not have a staff presentation. The applicant will not get to speak, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment unless this item is pulled from the consent agenda. Commissioners are able to pull an item from the consent agenda, and the public also is able to do so. If that occurs, then there would be a presentation, public comment, and all the rest. And then for items that are on the discussion agenda, there will be a presentation from staff, an opportunity for the applicant to make their case, and an opportunity for public comment. And then after that, there'll be rebuttal from the public comment. So do either of my colleagues want to pull anything from the consent agenda this afternoon? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone from the audience wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Okay, you can raise your hand if you want to do so. I see no hands raised. Is there anyone online who wanted to pull an item?
If there are any members of the public online that would like to pull an item from consent, please use the raise hand function now. There are no hands raised.
Okay, so we will not be moving anything from the consent agenda, and I would ask Commissioner Shattuck McNally, would you make a motion on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's see. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the items on the consent agenda and further move to authorize the chair to sign all findings and resolutions associated with.
Thank you. There's a motion on the table. Any further discussion on this item? Commissioner Kafalas?
I may have misheard, Madam Chair, but did the motion include subject to the conditions that are stated?
I did not state that, Mr. Commissioner Kafal, so certainly add that to the thing, subject to the conditions of approval stated in the land use conditions of approval stated in the land use packet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion then on this motion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 3-0. And so those everything on the consent agenda was approved. And now we will be moving to the public hearing discussion item. So if there's folks that are here for that first item, you're welcome to go, you're welcome to stay, whatever you'd like. So we'll move to the public hearing discussion items. And as said, the first item is, first and only item is the Askeland Electrical Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Appeal, file number 24, Zone 3601. And we will, there's a staff presentation on this, and so we will proceed with a staff presentation. And then so the folks who are here for that item understand there'll be a staff presentation, then there'll be, the commissioners can ask questions, then there'll be a presentation by the applicants, the commissioners can ask questions, then there'll be opportunity for public comment. Then if there is public comment, there you would have a rebuttal. So you would have 10 minutes to state your case. Are you the applicants right there? Okay, sorry. And then, so you have 10 minutes to state your case, and then if there is community input, you can do a 5-minute rebuttal. If there's not, then you wouldn't need that time to do so. And then we would ask any clarifying questions we have, and then we would deliberate and make a decision, so you understand the procedures. So we will move ahead with the staff presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners and members of the public. As mentioned, this is a presentation on the Askeland EV Infrastructure Appeal, file zone 24, zone 3601. So the project is located on the south side of Horsetooth Reservoir, across access off of County Road 38E, and this is blue highlighted parcel here on the screen. The applicant is requesting an appeal to the Larimer County Land Use Code to deviate from the requirement of the installation of electric vehicle parking spaces and the associated infrastructure. The applicant owners are John and Rachel Askeland. The current zoning district is a CC, or commercial corridor. Utilities provided by Spring Canyon Water and Sanitation District. The Poudre Fire Authority is the fire district, and again, access is off of County Road 38E, and the lot is a little bit over 1.6 acres at 1.63. A little more background on the project. So the applicant has submitted an administrative special review that involves a change of use of an existing vacant building to a microbrewery and tasting room with the addition of an outdoor patio. With that application, requires compliance with certain requirements of the land use code, including, but not limited to, the county's EV infrastructure requirements. The number of EV spaces required is a percentage of the total parking required per the minimum parking requirements of the land use code. And for this project, the minimum parking spaces is 22. And then based on that, the required amount of EV parking infrastructure, it is as follows. So the EV is a percentage of the minimum required parking spaces. Installed is 10%. So that'd be, from this case, it'd be one space needed. For ready and for EV capable, they're both 5% of the required parking. So in this case, it'd be 2 spaces. And that doesn't work. The review criteria, so the appeal to deviate from the standards or requirements. There's a list of items here that are required in the code for the county commissioners and staff to review. Those are items more laid out in detail in my staff report. So if anyone, if the commissioners or anyone has, member from the public has more questions on that, we can go over that in detail. So there's findings and recommendations. So the applicant appealing the EV infrastructure is proposing not to install any EV charging stations at all. The proposed appeal will not comply with all the regulatory requirements of the land use code and does not meet all the applicable criteria in the appeal approved, if the appeal is approved. With that being said, the development service team recommends denial of the EV, of the Ascalon EV infrastructure appeal. And then the suggested motion again is remove that the county commissioners denied the electric vehicle charging infrastructure appeal. With that being said, the applicant has provided a little more information this morning via email and stuff, and apparently is willing to install some of the EV infrastructure, and they can come up and, when they give their presentation, provide more what that looks like, and then depending on what that looks like, staff will be willing to change their recommendation from denial to possibly approval. But again, and with that, any questions from the county commissioners I can ask, and then also, again, the applicants are here, and then we also have members from our building inspection team that if you have any more technical questions in nature regarding the EV infrastructure installation requirements and things like that.
Great, thank you. Any questions on this application? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Justin. I thought I read in the staff, the development report, that there was, in terms of the number of parking spaces, at one time it was 22 spaces, and then I thought I saw a number 50 spaces. Could you clarify that, please?
Yes,
And I'm sure the applicant
yeah.
can clarify.
So again, per the land use code, the minimum required is 22. And then, as I previously mentioned, with that existing application they have in for review right now, the administrative special review, with that application, they showed the minimum required space. I think they had 22 or 23 spaces on that application. When they submitted the application for the appeal mentioned 50 spaces. And so, staff, I was, okay, well, until I see 50 space appeal, I guess, in the official application, I just based the EV requirement numbers off of the required parking spaces from the code, if that makes sense. So there is a little confusion about what is being proposed with the appeal versus what is actually has been submitted for review by staff.
So presumably the applicants will clarify that.
Yes, and then, yeah. And then, again, based on if they provide 50 spaces on the site, obviously those EV infrastructure spaces go up versus what they are required by code based off the minimum parking spaces. So I think if it's 50, I think the installed would need to be 5 spaces, and then EV ready and EV capable would be 3 each.
Great, thank you, Justin. Commissioner, any other further questions?
One more.
Okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I see that, I think we have some folks from our building inspection division within the department. And I'm wondering, there was a lot of discussion. I'm not an electrician, so I couldn't quite follow all of that, but I'm wondering at what point will we get a better understanding of what that, I understand the repurposing of that property and what is there and the intended new business that folks want to start. Who's going to explain to us about whether or not there's proper electrical capacity and what is needed and so forth?
I think if what they can explain, I think, yeah, the building inspectors probably be able to have a better understanding of what is on site and what can be done, I would assume. But yeah, that'd be more of a question for them if they have any idea. And also the applicant may have understanding as well, since they're, looking to occupy the building, and then have probably had conversations with
Jenny?
Poudre Valley REA.
Yeah, so we do have electricians from the building inspection group with the county here and available to testify if you'd like. If you'd prefer that they wait and rebut the applicant's testimony, we can do it either way.
Sounds like we'll wait maybe on that. Is that right,
I think it
Commissioner?
would be good to hear from the applicants, and that'll clarify things, and then our staff can offer any comments as needed.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions?
Madam Chair, thank you, but I'll wait till after the applicant's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so the applicants can now come up, and that is, you're John and Rachel, is that right? Okay, well, come on forward, and you'll have the 10 minutes to speak about your appeal, and staff will record that time for you.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me? We have a little presentation here. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Appreciate you.
And John, you're a taller fellow. Would you make sure you're talking to that mic so I can hear you?
Let's see if I can get it to me.
Thank you kindly, sir. Thank you.
So on the first slide up there, just kind of want to give you an overview of the size of the building that's on that property. It's a fairly small building. It's highlighted in orange there. As you can see, right next door to it is the canal that comes into Horsetooth Reservoir, and Horsetooth Reservoir is up there on the right-hand corner. I guess we can go ahead and move to the next slide. I just want to give you a general overview there. And there's the existing building that was a water treatment plant. It's about 50 feet wide and about 30 feet deep, the footprint of it. And there's a smaller building right next to it that was the pump house. And we're looking at converting that to a brewery, tasting room, and building a patio out on this west front here, about 1,000 to 1,200 square foot patio. Just for reference, we can go to the next slide. That's kind of our, initially, to clarify, when we submitted this, we were going to put in about 22 or 23 parking spots with original site plan. We received comments back from staff. And as we were working through that and just looking at what goes on up there, and there's a restaurant across the street from us, and it's a very seasonal area up there. In the summer, it's booming. They're busy, as really busy on the weekends. In the winter, it's completely dead. So we've been talking to them. They're like, gosh, I wish we had some more parking in the summer, just not enough room. So what we thought we would do with when we resubmit our site plan, we wanted to go up to around 50 parking spots and have about 12 to 15 up there on the north side that would be used only during the summer months, just a seasonal parking area, because we believe the rest would provide plenty for the winter seasons. Also in that drawing up there, the red line from the building to that dot there kind of in the middle is the power pole, and then that power line is buried all the way underneath there. So when we run power to EV parking spaces, it would come out of the building where that yellow line is and come up next to the ADA parking spaces. In that instance there, we haven't had, our engineer doesn't have the site plan completed yet. That shows one ADA parking space. With 50 parking spaces, we need to add one additional ADA parking spot. So we were thinking that we would put the EV charging station next to on the end of the ADA parking spot and next to just a normal parking spot, and just kind of designate that as EV charging only. I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So you were asking about the existing utility capacity. So I'm not an electrical engineer either. I'm just a mechanical engineer. So I was under the assumption that since it had a 200 amp main disconnect switch at the meter, that we could use all of that. It turns out we can't. We only at 200 amps, and maybe the electrical engineers can clarify that. We should have had about 166.2 kVA, which is almost translates to kilowatts available. However, when I called Poudre Valley REA just to clarify, they're like, well, you don't even have half of that. We only have 75,000 volt amps available because of the transformers on the power pole out there. So we're limited by the transformers that are existing on the power poles out there at the time. That's what it's limited on. It's not the 200 amp disconnect like I initially thought. So maximum usable power we have is 75,000 volt amps. Now we do have, I know that there were some comments about, well, you must have some 120 volt receptacles in the building, and there are, in fact. There's a smaller transformer, about 200-pound transformer inside the building that's rated at 10 kVA, and that provides 120 volts to some receptacles. Keep in mind that 75,000 volt amps was enough to power to run that water treatment plant that supplied water to about 550 households in the area. Next slide, please. So the EV charging station requirements, I know Mr. Curry discussed it a little bit. We are planning to propose 50 parking spaces just because of the seasonal nature of the business up there. And I don't know if the calculations will be based on minimum required or what we plan to put in if we go above the minimum required. So the 5% installed, that's ones where you're ready, you can plug your EV in and charge it. That would be, like Justin said, 1 if we went with the minimum requirements, and then 2 and 2 for the others. So for a total of 5 spots. If we put in 50 parking spots, we'd have to have 2 charging stations ready to go, plus 5 capable, plus 5 ready for a total of 12 spots. So based on the minimum of the code requires 30 amps at 208 or 240 volt. Each charging station, you can see on this presentation there, at 208 volts would require 6,240 volt amps, and at 240 volts, 7,200 volt amps. Keep in mind on the previous slide, that small transformer we have in there has a capacity of 10,000 volt amps. So we could potentially run 1 EV charging station off of the existing transformer in the building if we had enough capacity and weren't running too many other things than 120 volt or 240 volt. Next slide, please. So looking at the existing capacity versus the requirement. So existing capacity, we got 75,000 VA. Required capacity for 12 charging spaces if we go install enough capacity electrical panel to run everything, and say in the future we're mandated to get everything up and going. That's 74,880. That's 99.8% of our capacity to run 12 EV charging stations. For 5 stations, it's about 40% of our max capacity. 1 station, depending if we go with 208 volt or 240 volt, I believe that we could definitely accommodate that with minor upgrades to the existing infrastructure. And we're definitely in support of installing 1 EV charging station at this time without having to upgrade the entire infrastructure. I'll get to, on the next slide, I'll cover the cost to do an upgrade to that building. So the estimated cost, when I discussed it with Poudre Valley REA, we have 75 kVA right now. To double that, because I believe that's what we would need to do, to 150 kV, 150 volt amps. They said it would be approximately $20,000 for materials and labor because they have to replace the 3 transformers at the power utility pole out there, and maybe some other things, and there might be some unknowns, but roughly $20,000 was the number I got from them. So beyond the meter is our responsibility to deal with. We had been in contact with a couple electrical contractors, and I did get some numbers back from one, rough numbers again. He estimated around $35,000 for everything beyond the meter if we upgrade from the 75,000 volt amps to 150,000 volt amps to meet the requirement of having, based on the total of 50 parking spaces. Not included in that is engineering costs and permitting costs. So, budgeting something like this to upgrade the electrical infrastructure, probably $60,000 to $75,000 would be 25% additional, just for have some cushion in there. Next slide, please. So in the land use code, I can't read that very good, but there's what's requirements for new, minor expansion, change of use is what we're doing. So it discusses in there things that we need to upgrade, and we include parking, landscaping, screening, buffering, drainage facilities, outdoor uses. So that's the category we're in, change of use. And the next slide will probably tie it all together for us. So it's my time up.
You can have a closing statement if you want to. We've
Okay.
run out of time, and we'll likely be asking you some questions, so you'll have
Okay.
an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, in this closing statement, so basically in this table, it basically says that highlighted in yellow there. Let me get my paper in front of me. Where's it at? It says where the requirement would result in a disproportionate expense to the applicant in relationship to the overall cost of the project, the director may work with the applicant to determine the most critical improvements and recommend deferred compliance with less relevant facilities based on the following order of priorities. And then I think there was just one more slide, and just a quick summary on that. We do respect, Larimer County's goals of electrifying everything. And
So we
look into
are
the
out of
future.
time, and so we'll thank you for putting this last slide up, and we'll see if the commissioners have any questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Go
Not
ahead.
at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Kvalas, any questions?
May I have time to read the last slide?
Sure, you may.
Thank you. I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
John
Yeah.
and Rachel. So I think initially in the appeal, you had indicated that you did not want to install, if it was 22 spaces, the 5 spaces, you didn't want to install any of that EV capable, EV ready, and certainly one that actually you can plug into. Are you changing that now? You're willing to do some of this? Can you speak to that, John?
Yes, we are willing to install one EV station for ready to charge at, because we won't have to do any upgrades to our existing electrical infrastructure. The cost will be fairly minimal. We just need to buy a charging station, run some conduit, electrical wiring, and we have room on our existing panel, I believe, for that capabilities. Above and beyond that, putting in, looking to the future, 2 extra spots with, taking up our panel and another 2 spots. It just depends. I don't know if we're looking at 5 spots total or 12. I'm not really sure.
One more follow-up question.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. And earlier, did you say that based on your estimate and checking with Poudre Valley REA, the additional costs for doing the 5 spots might be 25% of your overall cost to transform the old water treatment plant to a microbrewery, or did I misunderstand that?
No, I think we're going to be, our initial cost for doing the upgrades and the improvements that we need is around 188,000 without any upgrades to the electrical infrastructure. So we're looking at probably
Okay.
30% extra cost to upgrade the electrical infrastructure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
So, you're looking to do 50 spaces, whether they're seasonal or not, there's still 50 spaces.
Correct.
That will be infrastructure. So really, the standard should be 2 spaces then. And so there's still the standard of having them EV capable and EV ready. And you're stating you're just asking for appeal, just if you want to just do one EV station, that's it.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that's all we have the capacity for.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Have we asked all our?
I think I'm good.
All right, you guys, you can return to your seats. If we have other questions, we'll let you know. So thank you. Appreciate that. We'll now open the public hearing on this item. I don't believe we have anybody in the audience to give public comment, but if there's anybody in the audience, please raise your hand. Seeing none, is there anyone online that wishes to give public comment?
There are no members of the public online.
Okay, then we will close public comment. And so we will open it up to sort of general questions, other general questions, whether it's of staff or the applicants, to see if you have any of those questions before we begin deliberations. So go ahead, Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have I'd like to ask at least 2 questions right now. First is to Mr. Curry. Mr. Curry, you based your original based on the 22 sites, but really it's 50, correct? Even if it's seasonal or not seasonal, it's still 50 spaces, correct?
That is correct, yeah. When they submit their second submittal for the administrative special review that we're currently, going through as well, which kind of triggered this appeal. If their site plan shows 50 spaces, then yeah, that will be 50 spaces where they.
So really it would be for 2 and then.
Yeah, it'd be off the numbers that the applicant mentioned. Regarding any approval or whatever of an appeal, if it was 50 spaces, they would be required to do the 3 installed or whatever the numbers were. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, whatever the EV infrastructure based off 50 spaces would be required.
Okay, thank you. But that's just recent with the submittal of the site plan, correct?
Correct. That was, the 50 spaces came up when they submitted the appeal application, not with their first submittal of like the site plan and administrative special review application.
Okay, thank you. So I guess since they're here, I'd like to ask a question of the electricians or county electricians or
inspection staff. Yeah, they
special staff,
they installed or inspect the electrical inspections.
Our consultants. Thank you for being here today. The applicant stating cost and a certain amount of voltage and all of those things. I know, can understand some of that, but can you tell me what, and the county's, as your experts and subject matter experts for the county, what is, in your opinion, what is needed for upgrades to follow for the 50 spaces for county land use code?
Hi, I'm Jim Johnson. I'm the Larimer County Electrical Inspector. When I read through this original appeal, the math was at best fuzzy. And as I went through it even more, it was inaccurate. The math that was just presented was closer to accurate, but still not completely accurate. I did just learn some things that I was not aware of. I was not aware that the utility transformers were was only a 75 kVA transformer bank. I assumed it was large enough to handle the built 200 amp service. Turns out it is not. That 75 kVA bank maxes at 100 amps at 480. I'm the one that wrote the comment in the initial comments about there must be a transformer in that building somewhere, or otherwise you have no 120 volt outlets. I now know that that's a 10 kVA transformer. Both of those transformer banks would definitely need to be upgraded in order to comply with the 50 spaces. Probably could squeeze compliance out of the existing if it was the 22 spaces. It would be marginal. The only reason I say it would work is because you're only going to have one installed. The rest of it's just going to sit there. If it ever became active, at that point you would need to be doing some upgrades, or things just would not work. I am a little curious. I have not done a site visit. I have not seen this building. I haven't seen the existing service equipment, but it's my understanding it is 200 amp rated, and it would be 200 amp rated all the way to the building. Is that correct?
I am not positive the wiring size is rated for 200 amp.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. If that is the case, that everything is built from the pole to the building at 200 amps, I fail to see where that $35,000 does the rest of this.
Sorry.
Oh, the mic turned off.
My
And can
mic-
you speak a little closer to the mic too?
Is my mic on now? Okay.
Yes. Thank
So
you.
learning what I've learned today, I'm having a hard time understanding why that 200 amp service from between the existing pole and the building needs to be upgraded, and that's where that $35,000 number came in. Again, I haven't seen it. I don't know all the details. I've not done a site visit. All I can make my judgment on is what I've read and what I've heard. It would be my thought that that 200 amp service would be adequate. And the math that I did, assuming 7,200 watts per space and 12 total spaces, which would be the 2, 5, and 5, that comes up when you work it back into 480 volt three phase in a balanced load would be 104 amps. 50% of the capacity, slightly more than 50% of the capacity of an existing 200 amp service. That would still require that 75 kVA main transformer bank on REA's pole to be upgraded. And I think they said the rough cost on that was $20,000. Again, not sure what's going on beyond that because I'm best educated guess is all I can give you at this point. If we went back down to the 22 parking spaces, the amperage at 483 phase in a balanced load situation would only be 43 amps for the 1, 2, and 2. Total of 5.
May I ask a
Yeah,
follow-up?
go ahead. Please go ahead.
So, not having been on site, and it sounds like they're trying to use the existing electrical inside or the infrastructure inside. I'm assuming this is at least a couple of decades old, maybe
25 years.
25 years. So, is there possibility that a lot of the panels or other things would need to be updated per code since they're doing a renovation and changing use? I know sometimes when we have some older cabins per se up in the mountains and they're trying to apply for a special license or something, they've had to put in a new panel and certain things. I'm assuming once you get in there and you guys are doing inspections, there might be a potential for having to upgrade some items anyway. Is that a potential? I know you haven't been in there, but is that a good estimate? This might be something that comes up?
My gut says that's unlikely. Commercial grade panels have not changed much in the last 2 to 3 decades. One that's 30 years old looks almost identical to one that you'd buy off of the suppliers today. If they're dilapidated and degraded, possibly, but my gut says there would be no real requirement to upgrade them unless the installed equipment demands larger capacity panels. And again, I have no idea what the brewery equipment is, because all that load would need to be considered as well. And I'm sure that the customers, engineers could speak more intelligently to what that new load is going to be.
Thank you, sir, for your expertise. I appreciate it. It's very helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
Commissioner Cavallis, do you have some questions?
I'll try.
Okay.
And Jim, you really need to talk. I couldn't hear three-quarters of what you said, so
I will pick it up for you,
I'm at a
sir.
disadvantage here. But I guess my fundamental question is, based on what the applicants have expressed as the additional cost, how much of that is specifically related to adding the EV charging stations, whether it's 5 or let's say 5? You know, the install, the capable, and the ready. Because I thought you were saying that some of the additional electrical costs were needed to be done anyway to upgrade the electrical system uh, from what it is now to what it needs to be for a microbrewery.
That I can't speak to, sir.
Oh,
Unfortunately, I
okay.
do not know the answer to what it's going to cost to refit that electrically into a microbrewery because I have no idea what their equipment list is. And I'm 10 years removed from the last electrical estimating position that I held. And you know as well as I do, a lot has happened in 10 years, specifically the last 5 with building costs and stuff. So I really can't speak intelligently to what any specific portion would cost. The point that I was making was in regards to the 200 amp service that's already existing up there. It is 200 amp rated all the way from the REA pole to the building. The only portion of that that is not 200 amp rated currently is the 3 transformers at the top of REA's pole. And the customer stated there was an estimate from Poudre Valley REA of $20,000 to upgrade those to 150 kVA bank. I'm having a hard time figuring out why the rest of that would need to be upgraded when the 150 kVA transformer bank would be only capable of supplying a 200 amp service, and there's already a 200 amp service there. So I'm a little confused. Again, like I said, I have not done site visits. I haven't seen any of this stuff, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. Did that clear it up for you a little bit, sir?
Thank you, Jim. I could hear you better.
I think that I think it did clear it up as much as maybe we can understand it from not being experts. So I appreciate it, Jim. So in your opinion, though, they could what I thought I heard you say, and let me know if this is right, is that you feel like they could meet the requirements for the 22 spaces, but maybe not for the 50. Does that sound right?
That is correct.
And did it sound like that you weren't sure why there would be additional costs for the upgrades because they would already have the kind of power they would need to meet the requirements of the 22 spaces? Is that
That is also correct.
okay? Okay, good. That part I got. So good. So I guess I would ask the applicant to maybe come up, if that's all right with the fellow commissioners, and maybe say, why. It sounds like you don't feel like that's necessarily the true and maybe you can explain kind of maybe you have other needs for that energy. I don't know why what you'd have to say about that.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, thank you for that. I do know that if we install 5 EV charging spaces at 30 amps, 208 volts, that's 31,200 volt amp. Is that correct? 5 of them, 208 volt, 30 amp.
36,000, correct.
So that's more than 40% of our electrical capacity. Is that right? Of our 75,000 VA for the transformers can provide?
The piece that you're not understanding, sir, and I'd be happy to go over this after the meeting with you in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
That 36,000 VA for the 5 spaces applies to that 10 kVA transformer. It has nothing to do with the 75 kVA out on the pole. That relates directly back to your 10 kVA because that's the voltage you're using.
Right. We will have to, and that we agree that transformer, that 10 kVA transformer won't be enough. That'll at least have to be changed out at the minimum to have enough space in our circuit panel for 5 EV charging spaces set aside for the one active and another 4 set aside for the future.
I'm going to just interject
Okay.
briefly, but I think what we need to do is sort of maybe have the board is asked a question, which is, can you explain, it sounds like where we're at is that you're applying to have an appeal to the code to not have to install as many ready and sort of functional EV charging stations as is required by the code. And we're trying to understand, one, under the requirement of the code, you only have to have 22 parking spaces. And it sounds like they're saying there's enough electricity present to fulfill that, but you're asking for 50. And so if you're asking for 50 and you want to eliminate the need to comply with the 50, I think we're trying to understand, the board's trying to understand the cost of that. The stuff about the amper, all that stuff, if we're not, because we're not electrical people, we don't know what that means. And so how can we understand, other than just the cost, what other reasons besides just the cost are you asking for the appeal?
Okay, yeah, you're right. It is
Thank you.
just the cost that we're looking at. And maybe I can discuss this more with Mr. Johnson, but it sounds like he may think we can run the one space and then 2 + 2 set aside for future expansion on our existing infrastructure. And if that's the case, we would be okay with that too.
And the other thing just to consider is that it's always, and this is totally up to the board and up to the applicants, but if there's a point at which there's not enough information or an insufficient understanding of the information and you need more time, we can take more time or table the item to get that answer and then come back. That's up to the board. You don't have to do that, but if you feel like there's some information that's missing or inconsistent information that you want to get resolved, that would be an option.
And if I can just add to that, staff got new information as of noon today, so we haven't been able to provide you with as much detail as we might have previously.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Madam Chair, I'd like to suggest that we maybe table this item. We got some information that is confusing. I'm still not sure if they're asking for 50 or 22 and whether they want to do 0 or, because that's what I went off in the packet here, and now they're saying they're willing to just do one site, but they don't want to do the capable or ready. And I'm just confused at what we're asking. I feel like we're kind of horse trading right now, and I just like to maybe move to table this till we can kind of clarify what is the ask and what is the need. And I think I can't make an informed decision because I still am not clear on what the ask is from the applicant.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kofalos, any thoughts on tabling this item till we get more information?
Yes, I concur.
Okay.
And we'll need the appropriate motion. I also would like further clarification. There was that one provision in one of the sections of the land use code that was highlighted in yellow where there's an opportunity offline for some discussion about, what is the in other words, we have to go by the criteria in terms of evaluating whether to approve this appeal. But it looks like there's somewhere in the land use code that was highlighted in the presentation that says that there can be some discussion if it's determined that what the code says might be perhaps cost prohibitive for a business.
I think that, Commissioner, you're talking about, no, it's 4.2.1.C.3. Section 4.3 is the adequate public facilities, and there is a line that says in a disproportionate, where the requirement would result in a disproportionate expense to the applicant in relationship to the overall cost of the project. The director may work with the applicant to determine the most critical improvements and recommend deferred compliance. So there is that. That could be considered, I believe. But it sounds like where we're moving towards is tabling this item till we get some of the information that we need, which would include some costs, it sounds like, and some clarification on how many parking spaces we're talking about and what compliance might look like and if that would change the planning department's recommendation as well. So is there Commissioner Cafalas, would you like to make a motion to table this item? And do we need a date certain then to table this item?
So we can do it for a date certain, or if you'd like us to renotice the item, we can do it for a date uncertain. The next Board of County Commissioners afternoon meeting would be on February 10th. There is room on that agenda. The next one following that would be February 24th.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner.
I'd like to think about whether we need to renotice this because 22 parking spaces versus 50 is maybe a public impact that maybe the neighbors might want to know. I'm trying to understand because this is like double the impact, double the area. So I'm just curious.
Well, and that, this is where we sort of have to separate out the two different, and Jenny or Justin can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is an appeal to the requirements, now that I'm saying that, when they do the site plan, that's an administrative special review, is that right? And so that will be an administrative hearing unless the director decides to push that up to the board. So the question of although it makes a difference because whether they're going to have 50 or 22 makes a difference. And so, yeah, that's a good, yeah.
Just wondering, would your suggestion be a date certain, or do you think renoticing would be in order?
So we could renotice it either way. If
Okay.
we don't do a date certain, we will have to renotice it.
Okay.
If we do want to give it a date certain, we can with the request to renotice it based on the change in circumstances. We'd be more than happy to do that.
With regard to time, you feel like we would have the information we would need to be able to do that on what was the date, first date? February 10th.
I would defer to the applicant and to see if they believe they'd have enough information.
I believe we can.
All right. I guess I'm not sure what the wish of the commissioners is, but we'll try with a motion and see where we want to go.
I would like to renotice it since it is like doubling the amount of, more than doubling the amount of parking spaces. And I think we can go ahead and do a date certain, but I would like to make sure the public knows that the parking is going to be more than double, potentially.
Okay. Does Commissioner want to take a stab at the motion here and we can,
Without a specific date? I'm inclined to go with February 10th. I would
okay.
assume that the matter of whether the administrative review is for 50 or that can be clarified by then, and then we can better understand the capacity issues and what the cost issues are.
Madam Chair, as I understood, we can do a date certain and
And
publicly
renotice.
it. I don't know why we would do one. I think we should do both.
I think that's fine
If-
to do both. Go
May I
ahead.
just make
Yes,
one
of
statement?
course.
Let us just check and make sure the notice requirement for February 10th hasn't already been passed, so that if we do want to renotice it and go with February 10th, we can do both. So
Okay.
Brian's get a check on that really quick.
Okay, we'll take a brief pause and see that, check on that.
So shall I offer the motion?
I think we'll wait to see, Jenny was checking on that date to make sure that it has been already noticed. If it has been, then we would have to pick a date later, that second date suggested.
So Madam Chair, would this be a continuance then? And my question to the attorney or a table, a continuance?
Yes, and it would be a continuance, yes. And I think the part of that is that you're not necessarily, unless new people show up, and that's where it becomes a problem of you're not necessarily starting the hearing over again, you're continuing the hearing you're already in.
Well, that's the reason I'm asking, because if we renotice it and people notice the parking goes up and now people want to comment, that's why I'm asking.
And in the past, when we've had that situation, if new people have shown up as a result of that new noticing, we've reopened public comment to let them comment based off of that new noticing.
Great, thank you for explaining that. So
And,
it looks like we're looking for a continuance, and, go ahead.
Unfortunately, the deadline for notice for the 10th meeting was yesterday, so we will have to have the hearing date be the 24th of February to do that additional notice.
Okay. February 24th.
Sorry, Commissioners, if I could, sorry, Jenny, I just wanted to interject that since this is, if you provide the date certain, I believe, at the hearing right now, the notice wouldn't have to meet the full standard code time frame requirement, because that would be additional notice above and beyond what the code would require, because you'd be providing that notice right now at the hearing to meet the code. But I'm looking at Frank to see if that's accurate.
I think that is accurate because we're in a hearing, we're continuing the hearing, and so those folks have had notice. With the notice, what I try to not do is if you're increasing the impact and the neighbors see an increased impact, so if the notice we sent out said it's going to be 22 parking spaces, but now it's going to be 50, that's an increase in the impact. And so for me, if that's the difference, it does sort of start the clock over again.
Yeah.
Because you're getting an increased impact. So I think we probably could do it the way that Ms. Everett's suggesting, but I think if you want to sort of take a belt and suspenders approach and make sure we don't have any issues, I'd probably do the 24th just to make sure we get it done.
Okay. Seems like the advisable date would be February 24th. It is a continuance, I believe. And Commissioner Kafalas, will you attempt to make that motion? I am sure that our legal staff will let you know if there needs to be.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. Thanks to our electrical inspector folks for being present. I move that we continue this item, which is, give me a moment. The Askland Electrical Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Appeal, file number 24-Zone 3601. I move that we continue this item until February 24th, 2025 for continued hearing. And furthermore, we will reopen the public comment. Is that correct? And that needs to be in there, Frank?
You don't need to put the public comment
All
part
right,
in there.
then I will not add that, but for continued hearing on February 24th.
Does that sound good, Frank? Are we good with that motion?
Do we need to add the renoticing, or is that just part of it?
I think you can add that, that it will be renoticed.
What was that?
You would add that it would be renoticed?
So noted.
All right, there's a motion on the table. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes 3-0. So there will be continuance of this item on February 24th, 2025. Those are the only items on this agenda. So at 3:58, we are adjourned. Thank you.